They made it illegal to grow the plant that survived every famine they couldn't. It requires no fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation system. It grows in contaminated soil, in drought, in frost. It produces more protein per acre than soybeans, more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach. And in 17 states across America, cultivating it can result in fines, criminal charges, or forced eradication by state agricultural departments. It was reclassified, not as a survival crop, as a noxious weed, Amaranthus species. For 8,000 years it was classified as a staple grain. Then it became a threat to agricultural control systems. The reclassification wasn't botanical, it was economic, because amaranth doesn't require the infrastructure that makes modern agriculture profitable. It doesn't need purchased seeds every season. It doesn't need chemical inputs. It doesn't need mechanized harvesting equipment. It produces up to 500,000 seeds per plant, and those seeds remain viable in soil for up to 40 years, which means once established, amaranth creates food security that exists outside commercial supply chains. That's not a weed characteristic, that's a survival characteristic. But survival crops don't generate revenue for seed corporations, fertilizer manufacturers, or industrial distribution networks. So the plant that kept civilizations alive during collapse became classified as something farmers are legally required to destroy. The archaeological record shows amaranth cultivation across Mesoamerica, dating back to 6000 BCE. The Aztec Empire produced amaranth as one of 3 primary grains, alongside maize and beans. Annual production reached an estimated 20,000 tons. It wasn't supplementary, it was foundational. Aztec military rations included amaranth because the grain-to-weight ratio allowed soldiers to carry weeks of nutrition in compact form. Religious ceremonies incorporated amaranth flour mixed with honey to create ritual figures, which were then distributed and consumed. This wasn't symbolic, it was caloric distribution through cultural structure. The Spanish conquest under Hernán Cortés didn't just target Aztec political systems, it targeted their food systems. In 1519, Cortés issued orders prohibiting amaranth cultivation. The penalty was execution, not because amaranth had no value, because it had too much. A population that could feed itself without Spanish-controlled wheat imports couldn't be controlled through food dependency. Amaranth fields were burned. Seed stores were destroyed. Within a generation, cultivation dropped by an estimated 90%. The grain that had sustained an empire for millennia was administratively erased. But amaranth didn't disappear. It survived in remote highland communities where enforcement was impractical. It survived because the plant itself is nearly impossible to eliminate. Amaranth is a C4 photosynthesis species, which means it converts sunlight to energy with 40% greater efficiency than most crops. It grows in soil with pH ranges from 4.5 to 8.5. It tolerates salinity levels that kill wheat and corn. It requires 1/5 the water of rice. It produces viable seeds in 90 days, which means multiple harvests per year in temperate climates, and it's a complete protein. Most plant proteins are incomplete, lacking 1 or more essential amino acids. Amaranth contains all 9, in ratios comparable to milk and eggs. 1 cup of cooked amaranth provides 9 grams of protein, 5 grams of fiber, and over 10% of daily requirements for calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese. This isn't supplementary nutrition. This is survival nutrition, the kind that prevents malnutrition during prolonged scarcity. Indigenous communities in the Andes maintained amaranth cultivation through Spanish colonial rule, through independence wars, through 20th century agricultural modernization programs. They maintained it because they had survived famines before, and they knew which crops remained standing when others failed. The Irish potato famine between 1845 and 1852 killed over 1 million people and forced another million to emigrate. The cause wasn't lack of food, it was lack of food diversity. Ireland had been restructured into a monoculture economy, with potatoes as the primary subsistence crop for the rural poor. When Phytophthora infestans, the potato blight, arrived, there was no backup system. The British government continued exporting Irish-grown wheat and livestock to England while the Irish starved. Relief efforts were delayed, inadequate or structured as labor for food programs that required malnourished populations to perform physical work in exchange for minimal rations. Over 1 million people died because the food system had no redundancy. Amaranth was known in Europe by this period. It had been introduced as as an ornamental plant in the 16th century and grew successfully across temperate European climates. But it wasn't classified as food, it was classified as decoration. There was no institutional framework for emergency cultivation, no seed distribution network, no cultural knowledge of preparation methods. The crop that could have provided complete protein and micronutrients during a carbohydrate famine was already present in the environment, but it had been reclassified out of the food system. Compare the numbers. 1 acre of wheat produces approximately 25 bushels, yielding roughly 1,200 pounds of grain. 1 acre of amaranth produces 1,200 to 3,000 pounds of grain, depending on variety and conditions. Wheat requires an average of 15 to 20 inches of water per growing season. Amaranth requires 8 to 12 inches. Wheat depletes soil nitrogen and requires fertilizer inputs to maintain yields. Amaranth is a low-nitrogen crop that improves soil structure through deep root systems. Wheat is vulnerable to rust, smut, and fusarium. Amaranth has no major disease vulnerabilities and minimal pest pressure. In terms of resource efficiency, amaranth outperforms wheat in every survival metric. But wheat is a commodity crop with established futures markets, subsidized production systems, and industrial processing infrastructure. Amaranth is not, so wheat receives an estimated $20 billion annually in global subsidies. Amaranth receives effectively zero. The economic structure doesn't reward efficiency. It rewards integration into existing supply chains. The nutritional data has been confirmed repeatedly by modern research. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Food Science and Technology analyzed protein quality in amaranth grain and found a biological value of 75, compared to 70 for wheat and 64 for corn. Biological value measures how efficiently the body can use a protein. Higher values mean less waste, better absorption, more usable nutrition per gram consumed. A 2019 analysis in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry identified amaranth as one of the highest plant sources of squalene, a compound with demonstrated immune-supporting and anti-inflammatory properties. A 2020 review in Nutrients examined amaranth's role in managing malnutrition and found that children fed amaranth-supplemented diets showed significant improvements in growth markers and anemia reduction compared to control groups. This isn't alternative nutrition science. This is peer-reviewed, replicated data confirming what indigenous populations knew empirically. Amaranth prevents malnutrition under conditions where other crops fail, yet the legal classification remains. In the United States, several amaranthus species are listed as noxious weeds under state law. Kansas, Iowa, and Minnesota classify Palmer amaranth as a prohibited noxious weed, requiring landowners to destroy any plants found on their property. The justification is agricultural contamination. Palmer amaranth has developed resistance to glyphosate herbicides and can reduce yields in soybean and cornfields. So the regulatory response is eradication, not management, not controlled cultivation. Eradication. The same plant that produces more protein per acre than the crops it's accused of contaminating is legally classified as something that must be eliminated. The system isn't protecting food production, it's protecting a specific model of food production, one that requires chemical inputs, patented seeds, and corporate supply chains. Amaranth doesn't fit that model, so it's classified as a threat. This pattern repeats across survival crops. Dandelion, classified as a lawn weed, produces leaves with higher vitamin A and calcium content than most cultivated greens. Purslane, pulled from gardens as an invasive pest, contains more omega-3 fatty acids than most fish. Lamb's quarters, sprayed with herbicides in agricultural zones, provides more protein and iron per gram than spinach. Stinging nettle, avoided and eradicated, offers complete protein and has been used as a famine food across Europe for centuries. Each of these plants shares the same characteristics. They grow without input, they spread without cultivation, they provide nutrition without infrastructure, and each has been reclassified from food to weed. The pattern isn't botanical, it's economic. Plants that enable food independence are systematically marginalized in favor of plants that require dependency. The future isn't speculative. Climate models project increased frequency of drought, soil degradation, and crop failures in current agricultural zones. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that by 2050, global food production must increase by 70% to meet population demand, while arable land decreases and water availability declines. Monoculture systems are already failing. Wheat yields have plateaued in major producing regions. Corn production is increasingly vulnerable to heat stress. Rice paddies are threatened by saltwater intrusion in coastal deltas. The crops that feed the majority of the global population are becoming less reliable, and the crops that could provide resilience, The ones that grow in degraded soil and survive drought and produce complete nutrition without chemical inputs are classified as weeds. When the industrial food system experiences structural failure, whether through climate collapse, supply chain disruption, or economic breakdown, the plants that will keep populations alive are the ones currently illegal to cultivate. That's not prediction, that's pattern recognition. If this vault revealed something they tried to erase, subscribe to preserve what history tried to bury. Knowledge only survives when it's remembered. The next vault opens soon.